We're here with Joe Wilson Jr., Director of Providence's Arts and Culture and sort of Experience. Is that the Travel and Tourism Board, or is that a subsegment? Is it a separate organization? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. It's great to be here with you. The Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism is a department that's a little over 20 years old. And we are within the city of Providence. We're a governmental entity that works. I work at the pleasure of the mayor and the chief operating officer and our chief of staff. But we have a wide portfolio of work here in the city of Providence. Everything from we grant make to small 501c3s and artists. We permit every special event in the city of Providence, including every film that's shot here in Providence.
Wow.
We steward a public art portfolio, and that includes two commissions: the Special Committee for Commemorative Works and also the Art in City Life Commission. That commission was established via ordinance in 1980. And we have several placekeeping initiatives that we're always stewarding. We also are producers. We produce public events, and we produce the signature event, cultural event here in Providence called PVDFest. And we also produce a 4th of July fireworks event. We produce a Summer Pops concert in the park with the Philharmonic. And obviously right now we're working on producing some activations for World Cup, including a fan zone here in the city of Providence. And so we also steward the sector. You know, we recently completed a comprehensive economic impact assessment of life at night between the hours of 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. And discovered that is indeed a $1 billion sector here in the city of Providence. And so we do whatever we can to steward this sector, to steward our art makers and creatives, and to really help this city and state live up to our state capital's moniker of being the creative capital.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, you know, obviously you have your hands full, right? And there is a constant need for ongoing support. There's always another event, another study, and another initiative, I'm sure. I think when we started to look at our event series and the sort of the monocle of Connecticut versus, you know, how do we work with others that are so intertwined, you know, whether it be in recreation or tourism or business, or, you know, where folks live and the whole spectrum, you know, it really kind of, I think, is twofold, right? It's everything that you're working on and excelling at, right, are things that are also realities and challenges and opportunities locally here, right? You know, as you were talking about your study of Providence, my mind was, it's like Hartford's always going through that study, right, to try and figure out how to get folks to stay post 5 o'clock, and the parallels just were too great to sort of just ignore, right? So and we really felt it important to kind of bring voices together from the region. And then the next phase of that was realizing how much is actually here in New England, right? Because a lot of times we're jaded. It's just, we get sick and tired of where we are, where we're from. It's, you know, it's old news. And when I started to do some research to realize that New England is the #1 place on the planet when it comes to amenities, universities, casinos, beaches, you know, historic towns, policymakers, funding, everything per square mile or per square hour of travel. And that really kind of stuck with me because Rhode Island's so close, right? And we often sort of disassociate, you know, the fact that we're neighbors, I think, in many ways. So kind of looking outward, what are some ways that, you know, you think there are, you know, partnership opportunities, right, that don't necessarily encroach on Rhode Island or Providence, but some things that can be, you know, sort of two-way streets that you've either tried in the past or have thought about, you know, trying to get through to sort of the surrounding states in the region?
Well, there was a lot in what you just brought up, and I just would like to address a few of those things. Um, you spoke about, and I didn't talk about the T in ACT, art, culture, and tourism, is tourism in our name. And I think that probably you can gather where I'm going with this is that the great thing about, for example, that Life at Night study was it allowed us to fully understand the economic impact of that sector, but to also understand the diverse interests within that sector. But oftentimes we think about Life at Night just simply in terms of bars and restaurants and attractions, but our hospital industry is part of our Life at Night industry. So many of our artists work as gig economy workers in that sector. But there are also quality of life issues when it comes to perceptions of safety, when it comes to sound. We have a city, as we know with many of our cities, post-COVID, how we behave in cities or want to interact in cities has changed. We're maybe not, working at our 9 to 5 all day in downtown, and then we're trying to keep folks after work to have a beer. We're actually seeing changing patterns in how people have relationships to downtown. Like, for example, you mentioned the close-knit nature of our communities. We now live in a time where you can work in Boston but live in Providence.
Yeah.
You can live in Providence but work in Connecticut. We talk, the advent of a lot of places you can work from home 2 days a week, only have to be in person 3 days a week, or you can work virtually. Even my former life as an artist, we can get into that later. But when I had to audition for parts, you used to have to go to Chicago and go to LA and go to New York and be seen in person. And now, with the advent of COVID, you can send in a tape that's actually not frowned upon anymore. And so the way that we're doing business, the way that we've been inspired to do business as a result of COVID, as a result of technology, and I think has changed the kinds of relationships we want to have with our cities. But I also want to say, in speaking of visitor experience and tourism, yes, we want people to come to our cities. Yes, we want people to enjoy, all of the incredible cultural and arts, entertainment offerings that we have in this region. But my job with the Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism is also to protect that capital. The capital, that's the people.
Yeah, right.
To protect these assets, because you will have nothing to sell if I am not working to support and invest in, as you all would say, and I say you all, as you say in the industry broadly in hospitality and tourism, the product. The product's actually people. And what we don't want to have is that tourism, which is so important to our economy, and the hospitality sector is a very important part of our economy here in Providence, with the density of restaurants and cultural offerings that we have in the city. I mean, we have a culinary leader in the world in Johnson and Wales, and we have an art design leader in the world in RISD and Brown and all of these other institutions that are here. So there is a convergence of culture here and of makers here. There's a tradition of that. We're also a very diverse community here in the city of Providence, and so we want to make sure that we don't create an extractive relationship that people have with our creative capital, the people that we're inviting folks to come in and see and experience here in our city. We want it to be a partnership, and we want our creative sector, our arts sector, our hospitality sector, all those folks working in that sector, designing in that sector, creating in that sector, feel a shared pride and understanding of the importance of welcoming visitors, but also being keenly aware too that we also live in a city and in a community that we want to have a healthy relationship with, and also considering quality of life. Quality of life for those who are living here, but also we want people but also thinking about that visitor experience. But all of that is about a mutual exchange and understanding that as the capital, the people, we want to be a part of telling that story to our visitors, but also to understanding that our visitors, we won't allow them to have an extractive relationship with this city because of how we inhabit that sense of pride in wanting to welcome the world to see who we are.
Yeah.
So, what I will also respond to is you mentioned one of the things that I love about living here, and I moved here 20 years ago from New York as an actor, right? I was welcomed into the acting company here at Trinity Rep, which is one of the oldest regional theaters in the country. And I have always found myself, and I've been on Broadway, off Broadway, I've traveled the country acting in plays. And so I had at one point that kind of very extractive or transactional relationship with my art form. Got to get the next job, got to get the next job, got to get the next job, need the reviews, get the next job, rather than really understanding the power of being in community. And what's so great about this community is literally on a Saturday morning, I could do my shopping in downtown Providence. Then I'm ending up in Johnston at the Price Right, or in Attleboro in Massachusetts at the Lowe's or the Home Depot. It's like the way that we even shop and behave, and the way that we exchange in this region is so different because of our proximity. Because taking the train, in this corridor between DC and Philly and New York and Providence. I mean, it's really cool. I mean, we live in a really cool part of the country where there's so many different kinds of experiences you can have that are offered simply by the terrain of this place, right? You can be on the beach, you can be in a city, you can be in mountains and elevations, you can fish, you can do all kinds of things in this beautiful region. And not to mention, there is I think a robust density of culture. And that's because I think that culture rests in the pride of the diversity of our communities. And so it's one of the reasons I fell in love with this place over 20 years ago. And I think it's also one of the reasons that we'll be uniquely poised to welcome the world.
How do you balance that? Because I would say, Connecticut has some similar qualities in, the diversity and, the pockets of culture, surely, right? And there's also some very traditional vanilla areas, but there is this sense that in order to grow as a state or as a economy, we need businesses and we need new residents, and there's always that seemingly that juggle, right, between preserving and staying true to the culture that is in place, right, and needs to continue and should continue to thrive, worrying about, not people that are extracting, but people that are gonna, kind of come in and alter what they have felt is home and what they've helped craft over their lifetime.
And I think that is indeed a fear, and I think that it's the job again of leaders and community leaders like us, that we're in constant dialogue to make sure to mitigate that happening. I just want to say also, I want to be clear that when I say culture, and we're not just talking about people of color, that we
Yeah.
each and every one of us, culture lives within us. When you even talk about broadly, when you think about the humanities and think about arts and literature and history and philosophy and languages, and the point of the humanities are these disciplines, these practices, these forms of art, is that they give us a chance to study and understand a culture, and that culture lies within each of us because we each have our own unique experiences and backgrounds and values. It's we all carry that together,
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because a lot of times culture, has some preconceived sort of, associations, and it's true. Like, we have oyster farmers and yes, and artists and athletes and actors and and those that love the outdoors and those that so it truly is this really great and very vibrant sort of spectrum, and that's part of what really should be such a pull, right? So like it should be gravity, and it feels like, unfortunately, too often it's what tax break is going to get the next corporation to come here, and that's going to be sort of the win. And then when you talk to people that have moved here and stayed here, it's all the stuff that you're talking about, right? It's all of the different walks of life. It's the different experiences. It's proximity. It's everything, and it doesn't always go back to where the corporate headquarters is, or what the tax break was to move into the region.
Well, and I will say I am certainly not against in any way whatsoever business and entrepreneurship. I'll just state that unequivocally. But what I will say is that, the questions that we're asking in the city of Providence too is, when we are always trying to attract new business into the city. We have, obviously, as I've said, a robust university community in this city. But what's a part of our conversation now is, yes, we all love tax breaks and we all love these things, but it's like, what are you going to do in support of our city? And I think that we're now speaking more full-throatedly about the fact that, yes, we want you to come and locate your business here, but we also want to develop a plan with you that speaks to how you're actually engaging with our community. And in large part, I'm talking about this creative arts and cultural community that drives our hospitality and more importantly, our tourism sector. And so we want businesses to also contribute to that and be a part of that and understand and be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. What it seems like we talk about the ability for Providence and other cities to continue to thrive despite the fact that maybe they don't have the same number of daily commuters into the offices. And so, what are some of the things that you've done? It seems like some of the events and the experiences are intended to bring and sort of retain that gravity at nights and weekends, but has that really been the focus, or have there been some other things that you've kind of leveraged as well to keep that vibrant, sort of all time, at all times?
Well, I think the biggest thing has been the activation of public space. And what do I mean by the activation of public space? That can be everything from a lighting installation to a busker to a festival. We're really so that's important to us here. We have a lot more folks living in downtown Providence now. And it's important for us to create, we want to drive folks downtown. We want people to come down to our restaurants, but we also have residents living in downtown. And so also, while the activation of public space is important, we also have to keep in mind issues that as it relates to quality of life. And that is really kind of a healthy conversation that we're having. But the activation of public space is also important because it also, as was outlined in one of the things outlined and discussed in our Life at Night assessment, is the sense of safety when there are people around. What we've also done is that we're thinking comprehensively through our work with the planning department around lighting. Lighting is a character in cities. That I think that so many cities across the globe are understanding not only the power of it, but God, the beauty of it.
Not all cities have neon like New York, right?
Well, and I won't get into sort of describing sort of how that is manifest.
Right.
But I love the idea that we're thinking about lighting as a character, which and you often hear me going back to my theatrical roots, but in thinking of lighting as not just like whether it's going to be fluorescent versus whatever. It's like not if it's going to be amber versus a more white light. We're talking about how do we use full color spectrum? How do we use pattern? How do we use light that's generated by digital work to help liven cities and give cities a sense of place and a sense of play? But again, thinking practically, when you activate public space, a sense of placekeeping, but also a sense of, and placekeeping meaning you're providing artists a chance to use the city as a canvas and respond to a city and respond to having them have a relationship with their city, and one that is at times contentious, but one that we hope is also fueled by love. And so that's great for our artists to be able to activate in a placekeeping way using a light and different mediums, but it creates for our guests a sense of destination and place. And the fact that it's beautiful and we want people to be able to also have that as an experience when they are visiting places. And so we're activating public space. We're working closely with, for example, the Providence Tourism Council. They are a quasi municipal agency that basically holds monies that are that are collected from a hotel tax. And they support us in terms of they also write grants for events. They really keep their eye on creating the conditions for events to be produced in the city of Providence, and really challenging our partners to think about maximum impact, visitor experience with these kinds of events, being strategic around parts of the year that we activate. We're becoming much better about not being afraid of activating in the winter. There's nothing wrong with the winter.
No, wear a coat.
So, so we work with them a lot in this space, but they also have, I brought up the Providence Tourism Council because they also have an illumination project where they give out, for example, grants to small businesses to decorate their storefronts during the holidays. The Providence Tourism Council is also made along with our planning department, and they work hand in glove. So you see, now I'm talking about these departmental, cross-sector partnerships. But the Providence Tourism Council, they've also put in lighting activations, permanent lighting activations in different corridors of our city that speak to, for example, we have a rich LGBTQ plus corridor in the city of Providence that's marked now by this incredible lighting installation. It just so happens that this area was once, our old Chinatown here in the city of Providence. And so what we also do by activating these spaces either with light or with people is we actually are also helping to tell the story of place, right? Knowing that those stories are embedded and imbued in an area, I just think it's rich.
How do you tell those stories now?
Yes, we love those stories, and we should be telling those stories.
Yeah.
And people feel a part of those stories, but also most tourists, as we know now, they want to go to a city and they want to experience the culture of that city. Yeah. They want to have intimate cultural experiences with the place. And we know that's really so this idea of cultural heritage tourism is big right now. And a shout out to my department, we actually did a cultural heritage tourism marketing assessment about 2 years ago, which helped us develop strategies about how we could best represent the city by creating or by telling a narrative that was broadly inclusive of all of our cultural assets, understanding where there are gaps in the stories that we're not telling, but also understanding that this is what people want when they travel. This is what people want when they come in for the weekend. They want to be able to have these kinds of deep, intimate relationships with our cities. And so that also guides our principle about how we create the conditions for people to, you come to our city once and you're going to fall in love with us.
How have you approached telling those stories, inside the borders of the state versus, outward to has it shifted, or have you, are you taking different approaches?
That's a really, really great question. Because as you know, in this sector, many states have an alphabet soup of organizations and quasi-municipal groups and, folks that are tied to the convention center. We have 3 tourism entities, that I deal with in the state of Rhode Island. Oh, really 4. We have RI Commerce, right? That does, marketing on behalf of the state. We also have the Providence Warwick Convention and Visitors Bureau, which basically their charge is to make sure that there are heads in beds, and that is facilitated through bookings at our convention center, and they support large scale signature events here in Providence. And then we have the Providence Tourism Council, which I talked about before. And you could probably imagine, so we have groups working on a national, international level, state level, and then we have this kind of quasi mix of Warwick and Providence and a regional strategy as it relates to the hotels and the convention center. And then we have the Providence Tourism Council, which actually holds the city's PR marketing contract with a firm that focuses on Providence. Okay. And I think that while we've gone through a lot in this space now, I'm not going to tell you it's all been sunshine and roses. It's been tricky sometimes because we have these conversations around, folks staying in their lanes and what is duplicative work, right? And I believe that this work isn't. I don't care. I want everybody working on getting a good story about the city of Providence. I want everybody telling the full story now, okay, of who we are, rather than that part that you think just simply suits your narrative of how you want to represent the city. We all telling the same full story. I also want to make sure that in all of these narratives, when you tell the full story, at its core is you're providing access and creating a sense of identity and pride in place. And we have a problem. I mean, you talk about like, what's the word you brought up earlier? You brought up pride in place. And I wrote pride in place. And you know, we're the smallest state in the union. And so we carry a fair amount of inferiority complex here in the state of Rhode Island and Providence. And especially as, you know, we spend a lot of our time trying to out colonial Boston and Philadelphia because the first shots were fired here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there is sometimes, I think, being the smallest, we use terms like we're punching up in our weight class, which I hate that phrase. Because actually our weight class, we're not punching up like we're below trying to reach up to something. I actually think our size, and this is, I think, where you and I would agree about the beauty of this region, our size actually is an asset, right? We can share resources. We can try things out. We can pivot very quickly. But also with size comes, I think, the danger of intensifying folks' need to silo and protect power and resources as well, right? But I think that if we can unlock the power of size, unlock the power of what it means for us as a city and state to share resources in this region, to share those resources and understand that, you know, hey, I can stay in Providence or I can stay in New York City, but Providence and our beaches are still, it's a 3-hour train ride. Or, you know, I can stay in Boston, but I want to go see Providence. That's a 45, minute train ride. Or I want to go to South County, telling that broader story. You know, you want to go and see a concert in Hartford, or you want to go to a casino, but then you can stay in Hartford and go, or stay in Providence and go to Mystic. I mean, you can go on and on, the aquarium. Or even, I'm staying here. Why not take a trip out to the New Bedford Whaling Museum, right? That's the power of our size. And I think that us finding more ways to kind of collaborate, and what we're actually doing is we're building the narrative for the general public. We're actually inspiring them. We're actually creating a narrative for them that they want to experience. Now, you want to experience this. You have to experience this.
I mean, you're getting me more excited than I was prior about Providence for sure. I've been there a couple times, but you're making me want to go back. But that's as you were talking about the size and sort of that punch above the weight class sort of. We do the same thing here, right? We're in New York shadow, and we're in Boston shadow, and we're the bridge, between New York and Boston, whatever it is. And there's this like whole apologetic for who we are, or we latch on to the Cotton Gin and Sikorsky and all these things, the first hamburger, whatever the hell we try and say, like that we've been here and have been doing that. But those that are really kind of living and thriving and creating new experiences, that's what needs to sort of flourish. And you go to other regions, you go into a hotel, and they have the vestibule or whatever, right? Of like, here's your tours, and here's your amenities, and here's your, your sightseeing, and whatever it may be. And it doesn't really happen. Here, to your point, I should be able to go down to the lobby of a hotel in Hartford, and within a couple hours, a half a day trip, I can go skiing, I can go to a fine dining restaurant, I could see a pro sporting event, and I could go to, museums and the shoreline, but we don't package it like that, right? Because we are so worried about, if we give any credit anywhere else, or if we share, then we're setting ourselves back because, we're all trying to punch above our weight in some respect. And that's the conversation we wanted to surface, right? Because we don't have we don't have a direct government affiliation, right? So it's like, all right, let's all talk. And whatever decisions were made or why groups haven't been collaborating before, well, we're not involved in that. But we should figure out how, right? The 60% of Connecticut residents that travel within the state for a weekend trip, like, what's another 5 minutes across the border, right, to Rhode Island, or stopping through on their way to Block, or stopping through on their way to these, these areas. It should be an easy conversation, and it becomes difficult. Territory and ego, I think, are a lot of concerns.
No, I really love what you're saying here, and I also loved your talking about the offerings within cities. It's interesting because how do I say this? There are, I think, signature events in every city that or cultural arts institutions that are the big dog, as we say in just using slang or that terminology. But there's all this other stuff that's going on that doesn't sometimes get the same kind of resources or noise or platform that other assets do. And I talk about and you talk about those things that are on the desks at the hotels and the like. And I often compare it to I think it was the Democratic Convention, the last cycle, National Convention, I believe, when Rhode Island, how they do the call out of the states. And I think we like to talk a lot about our calamari and all the kind of the state, basically the state seafood, but like what we've learned by talking to our tourism partners and really having a kind of really deep conversation invested in really understanding places, that who knew that every year we have a Langston Hughes community poetry reading here in Providence, where we literally read Langston Hughes poetry for 2 hours at a different venue. Who knew that Rights and Reason, which is an African-American theater company, or within the Department of Africana Studies at Brown University, that program or that theater was founded by a guy who used to work as a personal assistant to Langston Hughes. And for a while, he managed Langston Hughes's estate. How cool is that?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, that is a story. How cool is that? And so I think the really fun work about this has been working with our partners to say that there are countless stories about institutions and people and celebrations. Who knew that we have the largest well, it's true. We have one of the largest, if not the largest, Cape Verdean population outside of Cape Verde. In Providence, the Cape Verdean Festival is the oldest Cape Verdean festival held outside of Cape Verde. That festival is 51 years old. This year, the independence of Cape Verde, of the island, will be at its 50th anniversary. So it's older than even actual Cape Verdean independence. That takes place here in the city of Providence. Who knows this story? Another great story. So you see how I'm talking about these narratives that root place, create a sense of pride and interest, and it's going to force us to do more of the work. I was going to give you another story about kind of a local lore, but you get my point.
Yeah, that's the offset. You brought up the visitor bureau, right? And to your point, they focus on a few key events, but to get property developers, to get restaurateurs, to get new residents to fill vacancies, it's about what's going on during the week and what's going on the weekends that don't have those major events, right? To fill to fill the heads and beds, and that's when you think about, if you travel abroad or you go, like, the stories that people carry with them or share are always, I met this really great person and they told me all about this and showed me their culture, and I really kind of I fell in love with that, right? And that's what keeps people sort of staying the extra night, right? Or kind of telling that, not just, oh yeah, if you're ever interested, go have a lobster roll and calamari over here, right? It's something that's much deeper than that.
That's right. That's right. Our other organization I wanted to highlight, because I find it fascinating, is we're also going to be celebrating during World Cup the 50th anniversary of Rhode Island Pride, and it's one of the biggest pride celebrations in the country. And fun fact is, Rhode Island Pride started 50 years ago during this country's bicentennial, and it started during the bicentennial because gay queer groups weren't allowed to participate in the bicentennial of this country. And what an irony, what a great thing that we'll be celebrating 50 years of that signature festival here in Providence, and also then a few weeks later celebrating the 250th anniversary of this country. And so again, it's those stories and that I think again, it builds a sense of pride in place, but it's also, I think it's what people who travel and who want to, commit to having their meeting in a given place, or in, or a convention or what have you. I think that's what they want to know about place, and about why they should invest in coming into our cities and into our region.
When if we think about the spirit of the event and kind of bringing this region together, is there anything that you're particularly interested in sort of getting insight from, or what's worked, what hasn't, or just connecting with sort of other folks that are in similar positions? What are you hoping to kind of see day of, and then maybe even hope to see coming out of it, as far as action goes?
Well, first of all, I'm looking forward to all of it. I really love an opportunity to be able to convene with sector stakeholders, to share in conversation, but also to represent the work that is happening here in the city of Providence, and being an ambassador for the city. But also, obviously, I'll be looking to build individual relationships with people that we find that we maybe discover opportunities for collaborations, or if I'm speaking to someone from a municipality, we're sharing best practices. There's a lot of the work that we do, and this may sound like an obvious thing, like, of course you do, Joe, it's obvious, but we spend a lot of time talking to other municipalities. We spend a lot of time talking to other people and asking them, so you have a permitting process, how do you do it? You're getting ready for World Cup, how are you doing it?
Yeah.
And that's just really it's important. So I'm looking forward to that. And I think the outcomes, anything that continues to have our region thinking more strategically as a region, is, I think, helpful. And I'm kind of hesitant to.
No, go ahead, say it. I can tell it's gonna be good.
I guess I just wanted to say, without getting too political, I think that we're obviously in a complicated time right now, and I know people are feeling a lot of things about a lot of things. I think it's just going to be more important than ever that I think a lot of great important work are happening in cities. My boss said that all the time. He's like, I love being a mayor. It's like, I'm actually able to kind of be in the muck and get stuff done. I mean, and that's where stuff is happening on the city level, municipal level, and happening on the state level. But I would really like to see is that I think that we have the unique capacity as a region, because again of our size, because of our proximity, because of the way that we use public transportation and take the train and all the things that we do in this region. I think that there's an opportunity for us, how can we share resources and best practices, and understand that our power as a region is going to be an important thing. I think as we think about our place in this country, and I just want to just leave it there. I don't want to get too political or prescriptive, but I think that thinking of how we think strategically as a region, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Maine, all of us in this New England, and New York is not New England, but you can't not think about kind of that sort of I-95 corridor, that that as how can we just begin thinking strategically about acknowledging all that we share in our values, and also acknowledging again the opportunities that we have as a result of inherently who we are, and what our assets are.
Yeah, I mean, because I think it's a really great point, right? Because and take the current political climate out of it, which is making it even more turbulent, right? But it is always just a very political issue or hot button when you start talking about state economies and cost of living and getting folks to have either civic pride or to move, whatever it may be. That always goes political real quick, right? And I think when we start to look at the region, if we can all partner sort of on the side, right, and it doesn't take a public declaration from all of our state representatives to say, hey, we're going to collaborate instead of all act independently. The region has it can be the Napa Valley, right, or the wine country. It can be Tahoe-esque, right? It can be this destination that has so many different elements to it, and that's really where we can be on par with, instead of Connecticut struggling, like, oh, come visit and go to a Yard Goats game, go to a Hartford Athletic game, walk through Yale, I don't know, right? And then all like we Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, largely outside of Boston, like there really isn't that one anchor, and the message needs to be there is together more to do and a better experience than many other places that you could even imagine getting to. But that doesn't come through when we're only telling those little stories in pockets. And it seems like you hit the nail on the head earlier when you talk about the number of organizations. And if I don't want to talk too badly about Connecticut, but it feels like you may have a better control of the lanes and the spending than maybe others do, because the different voices, different focuses is certainly always going to be a need, but and potentially, oh no, we'll handle that, stay out of that lane. But it seems like you're at least having those conversations, and Connecticut may or may not still just be tripping over which organizations are even, officially appointed to do anything, right? We have no shortage of organizations. It's just who's lead, in different areas.
And being honest with each other, and being honest with ourselves about which constituencies we actually serve. And I think that's the being clear about that, But yeah, I'm bullish on. I love this area, and I am a child of the South. I was born and raised in New Orleans, and God knows I think New Orleans is one of the most beautiful cities on earth. Some of the best food ever. I got to tell you, I often compare Providence to New Orleans in terms of its sort of cultural density, and its rich immigrant population, those forced immigrants, indigenous communities. It reminds me of New Orleans, but the difference is, New Orleans, like they don't care what you think about them. Like they lead with who they are, and they're unapologetic about kind of the way cultures have merged to create these sometimes new traditions, and versus in a town like Providence, we again we go back to that inferiority complex. We're a little kind of cautious, and I think it's a combination of a lack of an understanding of truly who we are, not letting outside people that may not have our best interest in heart dictate who they think we are, or who we should be. That there's a living in that authentic self. I think is if we can do that more in this city, I think it's going to really unleash a sense of pride and a sense of a creative identity, and a power. I keep using the word. I want to think unleashing this power that folks will want to be a part of, that they'll want to come and see. But that first of all has to start with the people who live here and work here. And I'm a firm believer that if we build it, they will come. Because they're going to want to see, well, what are y'all doing down there in Providence? What's happening? Something's cracking up in Providence.
Well, it's that energy. It's the energy, right? That you visit certain cities and you can't articulated it, but there's a feeling, right? And that's what you're talking about is really embracing that so it can shine through, and can reverberate.
That's right.
Love it. Well, any other thoughts? And anything that you?
Oh, I just appreciate you letting me babble about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff, and I'm looking forward to the convening. And just to say thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm honored to be an artist in this role. I spent, like I said, almost 30 years of my life being an actor and director in the American theater, and I'm really grateful to be able to be in this position and have that perspective of my craft. One of the most impactful experience I've had thus far has been some work that I've been doing, for example, at Harvard and Cambridge, and just and really taking a lot of. I went through a public policy program, but it's about building state capacity. And the main message in sort of that methodology that I was exposed to, it did two things for me. Number one, it was so much like I was reminded of my process as an actor, right? We want to build safe rooms.
Yeah.
We want to build spaces that people feel like they have license and agency. We want to build spaces that people feel like they can take risks, calculated risks. As an actor, I take calculated risks based upon my understanding of the character and the circumstance, my understanding of my partner. So I learned from that methodology that, hey, I do have something to bring to the job as an artist. But what I also learned through that methodology is this idea that we should not always keep looking for the solution, or even being quick to identify the problem. That we have to really embrace being in this ideative state where we actually keep, like we do in acting. When I ask a young actor, what's your objective in this scene as a character? The objective is what you want, right? I keep asking the question, why, to ultimately get at what you want. And I think that we need to do the same thing as quasi-municipal agencies, municipal agencies, working, is keep asking, like we want to always kind of look for the next hot thing or the next big hit. But in order to create sustainability in, I think, our sectors, that we have to kind of find a space to live in this ideative state that will be created when we have this convening in a few weeks. But also understanding that being ideative does not mean that we're not doing anything. That while we are ideating, we're trying different stuff. While we're ideating, we're bringing more people in. Maybe our ideating helps us understand that we need to make more investments, or think more broadly about lighting in cities, or think more broadly about the power of programming in cities. That as we're ideating, we're still trying stuff. And then that's how we ultimately get to then understanding really what the problem is, and then really creating solutions that create sustainability and that can allow our sectors and our sector stakeholders to live in abundance. And so that would be my final message, and why I'm so excited about seeing y'all in a few days.
Yes, thank you. I think that was a really good sort of summary. As you were talking, it was like the way that I was sort of envisioning it was like, it's like improv. You were talking about acting, where it's like we have to be able to improv, right? Yes, you have a direction of where you need to take, the scene, but you're not sure, right? And there's authenticity, there's transparency, there's comedy, there's a lot of things that come out of that, and that's, I think, what we're always sort of risk adverse to just embrace, in our roles. And I think it also goes to the, there's an International Festival of Arts and Ideas that happens in New Haven, and I hope for the event, when folks get together, it's not, oh yeah, we do that too, right? But it's like, how can we? Oh, maybe can we share some, like, when's yours? Like, should we try and bookend weekends so that people can stay in the region if they're coming from out of town? Like, those types of conversations is what I hope to see.
Absolutely. Agreed 100%. Absolutely agree.
Well, Joe, thank you. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.